Syria. After all, Trump gave Erdogan the green light over the phone and agreed to get U.S. forces out of there to clear the way. These Kurdish forces fought alongside the U.S. to defeat ISIS in the region because we asked them to, and they suffered grievous casualties in the fight. But today's offensive is raising grave concerns. Current and former intelligence officials telling NBC News a sustained Turkish military operation, would vastly increase the threat to Americans from ISIS. Our own Ken Delanian reports, quote, the immediate concern officials say is what will happen with the 12,000 ISIS fighters currently being guarded by the American-backed Kurds. The ISIS prisoners are the world's largest concentration of terrorists. If those fighters are set free, officials fear a replay of what happened in Iraq between 2010 and 2013, when the core group who founded ISIS were released or escaped from detention after U.S. forces left the country. Think about that for a moment. Here with us to talk about it all, retired U.S. Army Colonel Jack Jacobs, heavily decorated combat veteran of the Vietnam War, who is one of only 70 living recipients of the Medal of Honor. And Tom Nichols, professor of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College, an expert in this area, the author of over half a dozen books, if I count them correctly. Gentlemen, good evening to you both. Colonel, I'd like to begin with you. What has Donald Trump just done here?
Made it easy for the Kurds to be eliminated completely. Made it easy for these 12 to 15,000 ISIS captives to be released and wreak havoc all over the region and elsewhere. And make it easy for the Russians to consolidate their gains in Syria, which is what they really want to do in the first place. You know the old joke, it says there's good news and bad news. The bad news is there is no good news. It's all bad.
Tom, I'm going to put up the front page of tomorrow's New York Times one more time for emphasis so we can see the very simple wording they chose. Turkey attacks U.S. ally in Syria. And Tom, as we point out, as we always do when you're good enough to come on, the opinions you express are yours and not those of the War College. With that in mind, what does this say about the decision-making process in this administration?
It says there is no decision-making process. It says that if you're a foreign leader and you want something, you get the president on the phone and make sure that nobody else is in the room or on the phone or able to stop him. It means that there is no advice, there is no interagency process, cabinet secretaries don't matter, advisors don't matter, the intelligence community doesn't matter. If the president gets loose with a phone and somebody overseas gets to him, they can get what they want, and that's what happened here.
Jack Jacobs, these have been U.S. allies. They have gone into the fight and suffered, as we said, just grievous casualties. What does this say about what we always proudly regard as the strength of that American handshake, that American commitment around the world at a time when there are so many forces trying to tear down the cross-Atlantic alliance?
Well, the first thing is that the reason that ISIS was on the run was because of the Kurds and our support of the Kurds and their support of our objectives in the region. What this does is completely change the equation about how people think about our commitments, not just in the region, but elsewhere. So now the commitment that we make, whatever it happens to be, will be taken with a grain of salt by allies, by friends, and by enemies too. Whatever we say we're going to do, everybody will be convinced that we are not going to do. And as a matter of fact, it becomes really important when you consider that what we want to accomplish there is in our national interest. So the perception around the world, not just in the Middle East, is now that the United States is not even willing to pursue its own objectives anywhere.
As someone who fought and damn near died for his country, when you hear the president say they weren't with us on Omaha Beach, you and I were joking about it in my office earlier tonight. How does that really strike you?
Well, two things. The first is it results in the kind of decision-making that we see that's inimical to our own interests. But it also demonstrates an almost painful ignorance of how things actually work and how things have worked. And I think that's going to contribute in a major way to the kind of understanding I just talked about. Nobody is going to be anywhere is going to be convinced that we have any idea what we're doing. And that's very, very dangerous indeed.
Tom, a two-part question for you, and you will get the last word. How can this ever be set right? Is it reparable? And is there any winner in this situation at all?
Not for the Kurds who are going to fight and die now, it can't be set right. And one of the things that concerns me, I think Colonel Jacobs is absolutely right, that people overseas are now going to doubt our word, because they're not going to make a distinction between Donald Trump and the Americans. Mm-hmm. As far as people overseas are concerned, this is the United States. The president is the personification of the United States, and this is something that we have done as a country. As for who's a winner, there's only... I mean, the Turks got what they wanted. Erdogan, I shouldn't even say the Turks. Erdogan got what he wanted. And the Russians are a winner no matter how this plays out. The Russians can sit back, really, and just let the damage unroll, while the Americans are shown to be an inconstant ally and friend. And if we do try to oppose the Turks on this, now we have a problem inside of NATO, which, of course, is Putin's fondest wish, is to see NATO fall apart. And he doesn't really have to lift a finger to make it fall apart. The president's doing his work for him.
Two guys you want to take with you into a fight have been our guests tonight, Colonel Jack Jacobs and Tom Nichols. Gentlemen, thank you both very much. And coming up for us, the president says he's not cooperating with Congress, period, because Democrats are not being fair. What that might mean for this ongoing and burgeoning impeachment inquiry when we come back.
All the parts that you need to keep her on the road.